Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special AgileAssets webinar, Modernizing Montana's Maintenance Management System, Earning Value, Saving Time, and Money. Our guest presenter today is Dr. Douglas McBroom from the Montana Department of Transportation. My name is Rick Hatheway. I'm a Senior Solutions Engineer here at AgileAssets. I help all our account executives by providing product demonstrations, technical expertise, and product presentations as well. My solution is really AgileAssets Maintenance and Operations Solutions, one of them being Maintenance Manager, which we'll be talking about today. I wanted to go through some housekeeping items. We are recording this session. We will share that recording after the event. Everyone is muted. We always get background noise on a big webinar with this, and so we want to prevent that so everyone can hear. Today's presentation will last about 45 minutes. We want to make sure that we leave some time for questions. Also, please submit those questions through the Q&A panel so we can see them and we can answer them as well. And then afterwards, there'll be a short survey. And please take a moment to fill it out so we can improve these webinars. We would appreciate it. We're going to talk about a lot of things today, about how the Montana Department of Transportation really increased their efficiency, and Doug's he's got a great presentation for us. Some of the things that he saw were replacing really paper-heavy processes. We're going to see that in a big way. Managing inventory, I think that was very important for Montana as well. Integrating workflows. Improving data collection speed with mobile devices. We're going to go through that today, and I think it's pretty exciting for us, and I think it will be for Montana as well. And we're really going to quantify the benefits of all these things that they've done in Montana, and we're going to explicitly detail some of the money that Montana saves, and I think it's going to be really great. I want to talk a little bit about our presenter. Again, he's Dr. Douglas McBroom. Doug is the Operations Manager in the Maintenance Division in the Montana DOT. Doug is responsible for managing and directing statewide maintenance activities and division operations. Includes responsibilities for the development, administration, and/or oversight of division budgets, policies, and procedures, program plans, material resources, and personnel management issues. The position reports to the division administrator and is responsible for direct and indirect management of approximately 1,200 employees within the division. It's a lot of responsibility, Doug. Doug also presented this at our International Users Conference this spring, and it was so well received, and we thought there was such value and good content in it, we really wanted to bring it out to a broader audience. So with that, I want to welcome Doug McBroom.
Well, thanks, Rick. I appreciate that. Rick, would you mind sharing, allow me to share my screen, please?
Oh, yeah, sure.
All right, thanks, Rick. So now what you all should be seeing is my topic slide. And Rick was correct. I did give a brief overview, or I did give this presentation at the IUC in April. It has changed a little bit. There's been some more things that we're able to quantify as a result of having MMS, and I'll include that at the end. But what I would like to talk about today is the history of the EVMS and MMS system, or fleet and our maintenance management system in Montana. I want to talk about kind of how we used to do things versus how we do things now. And then I want to talk about some of the interfaces that we developed along with AgileAsset, which gave us a benefit at the end of employee hours, time, and we could put basically a pencil to that and calculate the cost of savings that we got by implementing the program. I would like to then talk a little bit about some of the unintended benefits or the benefits that we saw that you really can't put a price to, and ones that we didn't really think about or calculate. But one of those was inventory control reporting. Another was management tool. And then what I want to visit and spend a little more time about is talking about a project that we were able to program through federal funding, because we actually have an inventory of our assets. So let's start here and visit briefly about the history of our maintenance management system. So in 1983, we developed a mainframe maintenance management system. It was implemented, and basically what required folks to write down their activities, what they did during the day. We call those activities. We're calling them work orders now. But they would write those down, collect them all up, give them to the folks in the area offices. We have 10 area offices throughout the state of Montana, and then they would enter that onto the mainframe. In the 1990s, we upgraded the system from a mainframe into an Oracle-based system, and we also allowed our folks to, or asked our folks to start entering the information into electronic spreadsheets so that they wouldn't have to have the handwritten issues that we had in the past. Now, that being said, our techs would still write those down, and then hand those to our section supervisors. Section supervisors at that point would then enter it onto an electronic spreadsheet. They'd send the spreadsheet to the division office. Division office would enter that into our Oracle-based system, and then we would be able to actually view the information about 3 weeks after we entered the data. Then data was finally viewed when we were able to view the reports in central office. 3 weeks after the activity occurred, mind you, we were able to review the data in central office for accuracy and then run any kind of reports. Our report functions in the legacy system really focused around data accuracy. So developing a report for how much we did or how much it cost. We certainly had those kind of reports in there, but most of what we ran in the oldest system was for data accuracy. We had 10 areas, like I mentioned, and the office staff spent a lot of time entering not only the MMS into Oracle, but they also had to match our electronic timesheet hours with our legacy system hours. And so there was a bunch of time spent doing that, and that's one of those time savings we got when we upgraded to our maintenance management system, because we have an interface with that. The legacy was prone to error due to quadruple data entry. Again, maintenance tech would write it down, section man would put it into an electronic spreadsheet, office staff would enter it in, and Helena, which is central office, would check for accuracy and close the system out every 2 weeks. And again, that data was then available usually 3 weeks to 4 weeks in the rear for looking at what we did and why we did something. And the last thing that led us to really replace this, we had a 40-year-old system. We definitely got our money's worth. It was a homegrown system, and it was time to change and upgrade. That going along with our fleet system. So we've had a long relationship with Agile. They were the successful bidder when we went out to bid in 2004 for our fleet management system. We did have a similar system, paper-heavy system, that we used prior to 2004. In 2014, our fleet management system was upgraded from, I think it was something like 4.2 to 7.0, and it went live. So we didn't upgrade from 2004 to 2014, and that's a lesson learned. That was a sort of a painful upgrade for us, and so our goal is to upgrade to be no more than 3 versions behind now, and it was really in response to the 2014 fleet management upgrade. 2015, MDT put out an RFP for a new maintenance management system. Agile was a successful bidder, and Agile strongly suggested to us, and we listened to their advice, to combine our MMS and EVMS on a single platform. So the next portion is I really would like to visit about where we're saving money and kind of step you through our old processes versus our new processes, our paper-heavy processes versus our electronic processes, and talk a little bit about, at the end of each one of those, about our savings. That will also include some of our interfaces that we have, and including our inventory control system now. The picture at the right is just a complex example of all of the interfaces that we had with our maintenance management system. Really not going to go over it. It was really there just to show you that when you're developing any of these systems and switching over from a legacy, there's a lot of considerations that need to be made to ensure that all of the interfaces and all of the systems that need to talk to each other are talking, and this is an example of that. So let's talk about how our old legacy system used to operate. Again, we had handwritten reports. We called those mini 70s, and you can see up here daily activity report mini 70s. Our guys would fill these out handwritten. They would charge their time to the maintenance activity. Equipment was general, so we have over 4,000 pieces of equipment for the maintenance division alone. In our equipment, we would say if we plowed, we used 3 tandem trucks. We wouldn't know what tandem trucks were used. Why is that important? In a lot of cases, it really doesn't matter, but we do have tow plows now. So we have certain pieces of equipment that have tow plows. And so our tow plows during plowing activities can plow twice as much as our normal plows. So that being said, we want to track that equipment and see what the work units are and the cost per work unit to really understand the efficiency of our tow plow fleet. We can do that now. We couldn't do that before. Labor cost was a crew average, and again, this was a little bit painful. Like all DOTs, if any of our infrastructure is damaged, the department will typically, if we know who the party who damaged our infrastructure through an accident or something, the insurance is often charged from the party who damaged that. So when we charge the insurance companies, we charge them for labor, equipment, materials, and any contracted costs that were necessary. Using the crew average, we actually often undercharge those insurance companies. Typically, accidents don't happen during work hours, and the guys that get called out are our section supervisors, our highest paid guys, but they would charge out at a crew average rate. And there were, I'm sure, some instances where, you know, just like average, you have highs and lows. I'm sure there are some instances where we may have overcharged insurance companies because we've used the averages, and we had a guy who might have been a Tech 1 rather than a Tech 2 out on the project. So crew averages was what we did. And then materials, there was no link between our store system or our materials inventory system and the maintenance management system. So all sorts of ugly and bad things tended to happen. So our stockers sometimes would issue something out rather than require a requisition, and our guys would have that material in their sections without it being used, but as if it was being used on the road. So we were understating our expenditures or overstating them, depending on how you look at it at any given time. And then each crew member filled out the section man would would fill it in electronically. You know, we had quadruple data entry, like I said before. And again, we were 3 weeks behind. That was always bad, and especially in Montana, we had our worst winter last year. I'd often get, before last year, I would get phone calls that says, hey, that was a big storm. How much did that cost you? And I'd say, well, I will tell you in 3 weeks when I get that information. Now I can actually go in and look it up. In fact, we had a huge storm over President's Day weekend this year. That was statewide. And remember, we're the 4th largest state in the nation, so a statewide storm is massive. And I was able to tell the media that was about a $2 million storm just for those 2 days statewide. So it gives our reporting is much better. So now there's no quadruple data entry. Employees enter their data directly in the system, so there's a single point of entry, which is good. Data is still checked by multiple people, so the section supervisors actually approve the work orders, just like in your states if you have the maintenance management system. And then once that is checked, the superintendents can go in and complete the work orders and double check that the data is correct. So really, remember, and this is just this is my first cost estimation slide, so I want to kind of go through it a little slowly. If you recall, we had quadruple data entry, and part of that data entry was just in office, just in the area offices. So this cost benefit slide is only for the area offices. I didn't assume any savings out in the field, but there certainly was some. I mean, remember, it's quadruple the data entry, so the tech would enter, the section supervisor would enter, and then send it to the office. This slide just reflects that the office folks don't have to put it in Oracle anymore. So we had double entry from 32 hours per month to 0 hours per month for each area office. That's a savings of 3,800 hours a year. And those data entry folks, typically, if you look at their rate, calculating their rate was a $93,200 in savings. Now, we didn't eliminate those positions, but now those positions are able to do other things other than data entry, and actually some more important things. We have our road reporting that's done in Montana that are out. It's decentralized, it's out in those offices, and those folks can focus more on those things to help benefit our traveling public. So along the same lines, we did have EVMS and MMS are now on the same system. And so we used to have equipment usage slips that we would fill out for all of our equipment. Over 4,000 slips every 2 weeks would go in and be entered into EVMS. And we would fill out those with odometer and how often we used it. The reason that we fill out these usage slips is in Montana, and I'm sure like a lot of other departments of transportation, our equipment program is proprietary, which means maintenance doesn't own the equipment per se, but our equipment program does, and we simply rent the equipment from maintenance. And so this goes in, this is how the equipment program bills maintenance for the equipment. But again, 4,000 slips of paper throughout the state of Montana every month. Data collection typically took, or the data entry and collection of all the slips took about 12 to 16 hours of office staff time. And now each section man, rather than sending those slips in, they enter the data directly into EVMS like the office folks used to, and they enter their odometers, they enter their, or calculate the days used. That actually is the interface that comes over from the maintenance management system. And what we end up with is our office folks now simply check the coding, which is down here below, to make sure that the coding has been correctly applied. So what took 16 hours before is now taking 6 hours to do now for the office folks. And again, that's a fairly massive savings, 8 hours every 2 weeks, 1,900 hours a year. So it's another $46,800 gain in efficiencies and potential savings through the Department of Transportation. Commercial repair orders was another one. This slip looks familiar because it was on the last slide. We also throw our PMs in. Our guys in the field will do preventive maintenance, which includes oil change and greasing zerks, that sort of thing, and they'll record that. So after the office folks got this slip in and would enter their information, they would then give these slips to the shop superintendents. The shop superintendents would look to see if a PM was done on a piece of equipment, and then they would open up a PM, enter who did it, close it, and essentially what that does in our fleet system, every time you open a PM and close it, or complete a PM and enter it into our fleet system, it resets the odometer so that we can know if pieces of equipment aren't getting PM appropriately, and then our guys or our shop superintendents can send emails out saying, you know, get your oil changed. But on average, it took 30 minutes for every shop superintendent every 2 weeks. But again, now because we're on the same, basically the same platform, our guys actually get into the fleet management system. They enter that, what we call a repair order, basically a PM. They enter their PM directly into it. The data is only entered once, only touched once, and the shop sup simply reviews it, approves it, and goes on. So what we see again, is about 204 hours of savings per year across the state, which translates as $12,000 worth of other work our shop superintendents can be doing other than doing data entry. And our shop superintendents are sort of well, they're in charge of all the mechanics in the area. So it is a high-end position, and we don't want these guys to be doing data entry. There's other things that they can do, and so that's $12,000 gains of efficiency a year that these guys are not doing in data entry like they used to. ETS Interface, our electronic timesheet interface, that's another big savings that we've seen, and it's an important one. So we would match our old legacy system hours to the total hours on electronic timesheets, and it would take hours and hours for our folks in the field to deal with this. Now our guys are entering their information directly into maintenance management system. That flows into our timesheet, comes over from our maintenance management system into the timesheet. You can tell that by anything that has an MMS behind it means it came over from that interface. So there's absolutely no need to check these anymore. The section supervisor reviews and approves the timesheet. That didn't change from between the old system and the new system, but that essentially is the check. The section supervisor makes sure that all the time is coming over from MMS, and there's no need to now check it. So we went from about 3 hours every 2 weeks in each area to 0 hours. That's a 720 hours savings of per year for other work, or almost a $20,000 in savings in other work other than duplicate data entry. The last one that I want to really visit about, and it has become an important one, is that we had a store system which kept track of our inventory. And remember, at the beginning, I said that store system was not interfaced with our maintenance management system at all. So they were completely two independent systems, and that caused disasters because of either issuing something out rather than transferring. There was all sorts of little tricks that was done in the field. But when the guys would do it properly, they would have to fill out a requisition form of what they used, how much they used, and give that to the stocker, and the stocker then would reduce that inventory in stores. And so that would take quite a bit of time. Plus, we tried to do reconciliation between the two systems, which would take staff time as well, about 2 hours a week. So now our inventory is linked. Our inventory system is in our maintenance management system. There's no more paperwork, no more requisitions. Transfers are done through the resource module. It flows into our maintenance management module. It's all real time. So if someone were to ask me how many cutting edges I have right now, I could look at statewide and look that up. So what does that mean? Stockers are saving about 5 hours per week. So we've got 11 stockers across the state. That's about close to 3,000 hours per year, or $104,000 in savings if the stockers aren't doing basically duplicate data entry. Office staff saves 1 to 2 hours a week in each of the 10 areas. That gives us 480 hours of savings per year, or about a $12,000 in savings for staff time. This is a summary of what I just went over, but if you look at the total down here at the bottom, it's fairly staggering. So we save, just by going to maintenance management system, we'll save at the end of this year, and we implemented it in October of 17, so we haven't had quite a full year under our belt. We'll have saved about 10,000 hours of staff time. That, if you know that about 2,080 hours is a full-time employee or a full-time equivalent, that's right around 5 employees savings that we have there. And that's about $286,000 worth of savings. Now, I was very conservative in looking at this. I didn't count any of the savings in the actual sections, and I didn't count any of the savings here in Helena. I would be very confident in saying just in the area offices, that's what we saved. I would double that if I was looking at something statewide. So we potentially are saving about $1 million, or excuse me, $500,000 a year just in reducing our paper-heavy processes that we have and going electronic. So that's all well and good. That's great savings, but as a manager, there's other things that I'm concerned about. Real-time reporting is one of those. Understanding our inventory. Do we have a shortage or don't we have a shortage? We've had big winners in years past, not as big as last year's, but we've had big winners, and trying to figure out how many cutting edges across the state has always been a challenge because of our inventory system. Now I can instantly figure that out, and we can ship cutting edges to where they're needed, which is a huge advantage for the department. We can actually go to just-in-time inventory on lots of things as a result of that, as a result of absolutely understanding what you have in stock. This is now being used as a management tool. Our guys doing the right thing at the right time. I always like to say MDT performs the right treatment on the roads at the right time, and now with this reporting, we can see if that's true. And then something I had no idea would happen, and this is new since IUC, we had the ability to nominate a project that's going to give a huge savings, and I'll visit with that at a different in a moment. But that project nomination really was a result because we have all of our assets in inventory. We went from a road inventory system to an asset-based system. And so doing that, you have to have all of your assets in the program. So what we used to do is charge all of our costs to a road, whether we were looking on a drainage pipe or a luminaire or a road weather information system. It went to that road bed. Now we have luminaires and drainage pipes and road weather information systems in our system, and we're able to charge those assets when we work on them so that the actual cost of doing business goes to the asset we're working on. So real-time reporting, like I said, this year was the biggest winner we've had on record. In fact, Havre, Montana got voted the worst city to be in for winter this year by the Weather Channel. It received triple the amount of snow that it typically does. In Montana, you know, having 4 feet of snow on the ground is not uncommon. So if that's what they typically had, they would have had 12 feet on the ground this year. We got lots of calls for how much this one cost, and I was able to, at any given time, instantly pull that information for media, the director's office, and my boss, my administrator. So this year, we spent $29.63 million on winter compared to the next highest year, which was $27.5 million. But the advantage here was real-time reporting. Real-time inventory is another issue. So if you can imagine a busy winter, we also had stockpile shortages for sand and salt. So one of the things that we were able to do, and anybody who has Agile is able to set up graph-type reports. This is one showing stockpile amounts. And you can see this is pretty valuable. We typically have, I would say we typically have 3,000 or 4,000 yards of sanding material on hand at any given time in any given section. But if you look at a lot of our stockpiles were not only under 200, but they were under 100. But what this did is it gave our maintenance chiefs, which there are 10 of them, one in each of the areas in Montana, the ability to look at the stockpile, look at who's got more, and then distribute that around after a storm to make sure that they're ready for the next storm and they have the material they need to take care of the roads. So the beauty of this system is we could see what we had on hand at any given moment. We could get that stock to where it needed, and the moral of this story is we didn't run out of salt or sand at all during the winter, which was a huge accomplishment. Using a management tool, this report is just here more of as a mnemonic for me, but what we can look at in what I've set up for our chiefs are reports where they can look at what each section does each week. And they run these reports Monday, and they can look at what they did the previous week. They can set up, they can look at what they did the previous day if they want to. But they look at what they did and they can say, all right, are we doing the things that we need to do on the road, knowing the maintenance needs in that area? And they can start questioning the section supervisors. Hey, you spend a lot of time servicing equipment, but man, there's a lot of guardrail hit. That should be your #1 priority. And so they can start directing the maintenance personnel to be more effective and to do the priorities first, the higher priorities first, which for the Department of Transportation is anything dealing with safety. So our management tool, this has been used, and we can, again, it's real time. Typically, our managers couldn't get into these reports before. We certainly run them if they asked us to, but they oftentimes knew what the guys were doing, but didn't know what in its entirety what they were doing. And now they can see in the entirety what each section's doing. This is new since the IUC, and this is one of those ones that surprised me. We're actually able to program a project to replace all of the luminaires in the state of Montana from high-pressured sodium to light-emitting diodes. This is huge for us. We have we spend about $2 million a year on utility costs. Actually, excuse me, we spend about $4 million a year on utility costs for the high-pressure sodium. If we're able to replace to our light-emitting diodes, the utility costs on those are about half. So going from a $4 million a year utility bill to a $2 million a year utility bill statewide is pretty enticing for a department to want to do. We've done some studies on this in the past to make sure that the light-emitting diodes that we're going to use, or the LEDs that we're going to use, actually emit the same brightness or same candles, if you would, on the ground for the drivers, so there's no loss of lighting. And we did 2 research studies to ensure that. We found that that was the case, which is good. And so what we were able to do at that point then is to kind of throw our hands in the air saying, we know we can do this. We should, anytime we get a new project, we should make all the luminaires LEDs, but because we don't know where our LEDs are or how many there are, we can't do this statewide until we got our new maintenance management system. So what I have here is just a graph at the bottom that just shows I've got 10 areas, 5 districts, 2 areas in each district, showing how many luminaires are federal eligible, how many luminaires are just state eligible only, and then the cost to replace the total luminaires in each of these districts to LED luminaires. So what we found is we have a $8 million, almost a $9 million expenditure to replace these, and that gives us about a 4-year payback to return on our investment. The good news is these light-emitting diodes, they're good for 15 years. So we got 11 years of having our utility costs. That's all a benefit to the department because we simply have these inventoried because we went from a road-based system to an asset-based system. Again, I had no idea that this was going to occur, but once we had all of the information in the system, I went to my supervisor and said, hey, why don't we simply figure out how many we have in each, because I've got a map now, and run this and program the project, and we were able to do that. So what does future hold for me? We have what we'd like to see is time savings in the field. So right now our guys are still going out. There's a lot of Montana roads that have no cellular coverage. So if you have no cellular coverage, you can't get on the system. If you can't get on the system, you can't enter your work orders while you're out there. So they're still writing on paper and getting back to the office and then entering that in. So there's still a little bit of double entry. What I'm hoping to go for is Work Manager mobile application in the future. I think Rick's going to talk a little bit more about that, but we're still at 7.0, and we're just starting the process to upgrade to the most recent version, and I do believe it's in the most recent version. If not, it'll be in the next one. Prioritization of work, using, again, being more efficient and effective, doing the right thing at the right time. Our chiefs are really liking these reports. They're able to understand, coach our maintenance techs out in the field to what needs to be done and when. Gains in efficiency, understanding what we use, how much we use, especially with our winter maintenance. Our winter maintenance materials tend to be about $10 million a year. If we're unable to view how much they use during a storm until 3 weeks after the storm, it sort of becomes a meaningless number. I've got a maintenance chief now who's reviewing how much material he uses after each storm to see if he applied and over-treated roads or under-applied, and then he's coaching our techs. What he's finding is that they're over-applying. Just like most people, if 1 gallon's good enough, then 5 ought to be super good. So what we're seeing is less material on the road because we're able to track the material basically real time. And then we're using data to feed design, which is really good. We've just created a view for our engineering, and this happened within the last month, where they're looking at putting a corridor in from 1 milepost to the next, and then all of the work orders that occurred on any of the assets that lie within that corridor come up for them. And they can start to do things like look and say, hey, you guys are spending a lot of time picking up rocks. Maybe I need to address this talus slope that's next to the road. Or you guys are getting these guardrail hits quite a bit. So let's see if we can do a high-tension cable in this area, which is cheaper and faster for us to maintain. So we're actually now, our work orders are indicating and directing design in the field, which is huge for us. So takeaway, we went from a paper-heavy system to a streamlined point of entry, and we save, I'm very confident saying we save right around $300,000 a year, but I'm also fairly confident that if we doubled that, I would still be fairly accurate. Management tools such as inventory control, real-time reporting ensure that we're working as efficiently and effectively as possible. Just like your states, we have a state legislature that we have to answer to, and we want to make sure that we are expending taxpayer dollars to the most effective way that we can. And then because we went to an asset-based system, we're able to program projects that enable MDT to save more time and money, just like the luminaires. So, and that is all I have for this. If you could hand the back to Rick, we can answer questions at that point.
Okay. Thanks, Doug. I got to know Doug at IEC as a person, and understanding his resume, and Montana is really lucky to have him. And so we appreciate your presentation, Doug. And I wanted to follow up with some of the kind of our next step and something that we're pretty excited about, which is the Work Manager. And this is our mobile application. And Doug kind of talked about these paper-heavy processes, and that's really why we created the Work Manager. But we really wanted to enable the crew leads and the yard supervisors to capture the work when and where they're doing it. So when they're in the field, they could just capture what they're doing and the resources they're using. And that really provides really accurate data because, you know, they're there, they know who's working on the job, what equipment they're doing, what inventory they're using, and also simplified workflow for, you know, like something like menu-driven day cards. So it really makes it easy to capture that data as well. And also being able to associate that work with either assets or locations, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then timely data. So they're out there doing the work, and then they can just upload it whenever they're ready, and now it's available in your system. And so, you know, all your resources, your inventory levels, your costs are being updated immediately as well. And so it's really it provides you cost savings, saving time capturing and entering data, accurate costs to run your business, better inventory management, and efficiently documenting the recovery work like Doug was talking about earlier, and we'll touch more on that. So I wanted to kind of go through some features and help you understand why these features are beneficial to you. Role-based access, so the access you have on the Work Manager app really comes from the system. And so it allows you to filter all the information to just the information that's really pertinent to you and your job, whatever assets, what area, and we can even provide mobile-specific configurations to even really tailor that workflow for you as well. So the app itself is offline capable. So like Doug said, if you don't have a cellular connection, it's okay. The user sync is really flexible. So the idea is in the morning, you download all your work, and then whenever you have a network connection, it could be any time of day, or let's say at the end of the day, you just upload all that work that you've entered in, and you're done. We allow you to add comments via voice, so and I think comments are always helpful on providing more information. I think more information is better, so you just tap a button and talk into it, and it provides that voice to text. So I think it's makes it really easy. Location aware. So with the GPS, you know where you're at, and that helps you by really telling you, you know, what is in the field. And so all the assets around you, whatever location, so you can attach all that information to the work order. And so it makes it really easy to attach those. So you can, when you're out there doing work and you have a work order, you can either select an asset or a location. And we support point assets, linear, and in this next release we're going to be adding non-LRS assets as well. And so things like dams and things like that you can add as well. And really the day cards is the bread and butter, what we really, it's our targeted application. So you're adding that labor, that material, and you can do that right in the field, and it comes from your role. And so it's really easy to add those things and make sure you're capturing those costs. And also the Work Manager, you can actually add work orders in the field. So if you've got some reactive work, you're driving down the road and you see a problem and you fix that problem, you want to make sure you capture that. And so you have the ability to create a work order and then add locations and then add the day cards to that without having to download a work order. So I think that's really helpful as well. And so with that, just wanted to touch briefly on Work Manager app. We're really excited about that. And at this point, we'll go through some questions. I think I've got some here. So the first one from Omar is, thanks, this is a great example of data management. The question is how this data collected is being analyzed in order to help decision making and to improve maintenance and operations as well as overall asset performance. So I think, Doug, that may be directed towards you, but I think it's kind of asking what in the future, now that you've collected all this data, how's that going to help you?
So I think, again, the couple big pieces. First off, we're going to start looking at what it costs to maintain each of the assets that we have in maintenance management system. And we can do the compare and contrast, you know, not all assets are created equal, and some are more important for us to be maintaining. We can start looking at level of service that we have on each of the assets and saying, you know, what's an acceptable level of service, and how much money does it take to get us to that level of service. So it really will start directing us. But importantly, the one I'm most excited about is the piece I talked about, where when we come back through a road and construction is looking at a reconstruct, they can pull our data and to start to make some informed decisions about how to build the next road that is, well, my hope is maintenance free. That'll never happen, but is reduced in its cost of maintenance. And then the other thing, I guess, with the work manager that I wanted to hit on that was going to help us be more efficient is, you know, not only are we going to able to have that, again, the single point of entry. We're still not writing stuff. We're still writing a few things down because we don't have a mobile version yet. But I think it's going to be a morale piece because our guys can enter the information as they're going out to a job, at the job, and coming back from the job. We typically have more than one guy in a truck. I'm not suggesting somebody enters this while they're driving. But at the end of the day, it syncs up when they get back to the shop. They're able to grab their lunch pail and go home. And that's really important to me, that our guys are able to get the off time as they're out there doing the important work. So I hope that answered the question.
Thanks, Doug. All right, Justin's asking, are you attaching GIS assets to work orders? And I think the answer, well, I know the answer is yes, and you saw it with the work manager, and so we can reference assets via the LRS or location or both, really. All right. Next one is calling you out specifically, Doug. You outlined some clearly identifiable financial benefits. Very cool. Beyond the tangible calculated benefits, you shared thoughts on other enabling yet less tangible benefits you are receiving. Any idea on what the financial impact is on those?
But like I said, we're going to save $2 million a year on our utilities cost, 11 years before we pay back the initial investment in switching over, or excuse me, 4 years until we pay back, but 11 years after. So we're going to see a $22 million just in that one program alone, $22 million over 11 years. That's huge. That pays for our system, our upgrades, everything. I would say with the reports and being more efficient, dealing with the inventory control that I mentioned, I would be willing to venture we're going to see $1 million to $1.5 million savings a year just in our efficiencies, inventory control, and our ability to monitor what we're doing out in the field.
Okay, next question from Wade is Montana using Agile for their timesheet payroll system? Also, who is entering the employee time on the day cards? Employees, supervisors, timekeepers?
Great question. Yeah. So what happens, so right now, we just have an interface, so the employees are just entering their time once, and it's the employee themselves that's entering their data on the time card, in the day cards, excuse me, on the labor sheet. The supervisor has to approve all that, and when they approve it, it goes and hits our electronic timesheet. Now, that's the same supervisor, by the way, that's approving the employee's time every 2 weeks and submitting those timesheets. The one thing that we made a conscious decision on, and this might be getting in the weeds a little bit, but the electronic timesheet that we have had a bunch of edit checks, and we left the edit checks to the electronic timesheet. So there's nothing coming back from the electronic timesheet to MMS saying, oops, this one doesn't work out. What we do, though, is if the timesheets fail, the supervisor and the employees go back and they fix the time cards manually. Okay, thanks, Doug. Another good question, I think, from Justin. How receptive are crews to logging data electronically, and how much training is involved? Excellent. So we went live in October. We started Train the Trainer in August, and we spent all of September doing end user training. So it was about a month, but we had to train, you know, about 900 users, actual users or data enterers, and about 100 to 150 other folks who were going to run reports. So that took about a month to do that training. Obviously, I can say they were 100% receptive because it was my program, but of course there are always people who don't like computers and didn't like it. Most people did. Most people carry an iPhone in their pocket or some kind of smartphone, and it wasn't a huge issue. I'll tell you what, though, I just went out to a crew, visited with them, and joked with them when I came in. I said, yeah, we're going to go back to the old system, and, oh, they were ticked off till I told them I was kidding. So less than 10 months into the system, I think most people would scream at me if I were going back to the old paper system.
Okay. I think we've got some also in the chat as well. So from Mary, an accident happens on the road. How is the MMS engaged?
If there's an accident on the road, how do we engage? That actually happens external to the system. So if there's an accident on the road, either we are informed or are on the scene because we've witnessed it or came upon it, or Highway Patrol calls us. We go out, do whatever we need to do, typically traffic control, come back in, and then enter that into MMS. So it's really outside the system process.
Okay. So Tom has a question, which states has this been deployed in? MMS specifically, I would say, I don't have a count off the top of my head, but I would say maybe 15 nominally, but I'd have to get back to you, Tom, on that. Let's see. Another good question, Doug. How did the field staff feel about the usability of MMS? Was it user-friendly?
I think so. You know, it's a good question. Some of them, like the folks who really have iPhones, you know, or smartphones on their personnel, I don't think they had too much of an issue with it. It's a web-based program, so it behaves just like getting on, you know, any program web-based, or, you know, they're very similar. I think the people who don't like computers don't like it, so that would be, yeah.
And then from Brandon, did the system track liquid de-icer like the salt sand? If so, was the system automated using tank level sensors?
So now this is actually a much better question for Idaho, because Idaho has a really cool system, and I'll get to that in 2 seconds. But briefly, no, that's outside. So we have a Cirrus controller that we use in our trucks. We actually have 3 controllers, but Cirrus is the one that we use now exclusively. That controller gives us storm totals, and that's what the guys put on the MMS system. What Idaho has done is they have, I believe, a Cirrus controller which has AVL in it. Again, tells the totals. But when they drive in the shop, it downloads those totals, opens up work orders, and puts that on basically on their work orders automatically. They call that the WARS system, and it is, I saw a presentation years ago, and I work with one of the gentlemen who is the ops manager down there, and as far as I can tell, it works really well. And Idaho developed that in conjunction with AgileAssets, but I believe the WARS portion was done with federal money. I think you could ask Idaho what they did, and they might even help you with some of the programming.
Okay. Doug, another one for you. Will your traffic and safety group use the system to request new assets, new stop sign needed, guide rail repair, etc.?
So, yeah, that's the great question. So that's kind of the elephant in the room is our inventory is only as good as the last time we went out and collected it. So typically what happens now is our construction folks are going out. We have a ArcGIS collector, which is a Esri product. They go out and they highlight anything new that was added to a construction project that gets uploaded. So when the traffic personnel actually, they don't request through us, so sometimes they do and we'll put them up and then we'll add it ourselves. But if they have a safety project that gets run through construction, construction then picks up all of the elements of that project at the end of the project, and then it's uploaded to MMS, and it's there for us when we do a repair order on it.
Okay, just a couple more questions. I know we're low on time. Karen asked, when will Mobile Work Manager be ready for states to implement, and what modules will it work with? Well, Work Manager is already available, and right now the modules are the maintenance module, but it's on our roadmap to connect to other modules as well. And let's see. What types of devices are the supervisors and employees using for data entry? Doug, I think that's a question for you.
Great question. So that was one of the things I did too, was to sort of do this FTE per computer calculation, and we were at about 3.5, almost 4 FTE per computer, which was way too few. So we ended up with a 2 FTE per computer ratio is what we looked for, and that's how I purchased the computers. What I ended up buying were laptops, and the reason is because I knew the system wasn't mobile, but I knew that when we went live, or not when we went live, before we went live, I knew that it wasn't mobile, and I knew Agile was working on the Mobile Work Manager. So those computers, I purchased laptops so they could be mobile in the event that we did get the Mobile Work Manager. So I bought those with an eye to the future. So right now it's laptops. When we go to 7.3, we'll still do laptops. So I think what we're going to do is introduce some iPads as well in the field, because I think that might be easier for them to enter in than laptops. And just normal laptops, not hardened or anything. By the time you get a hardened laptop, you can buy 2 or 3 laptops for that price. And our guys are hard on equipment, but they're not that hard for the life of our laptops.
All right, and so just to be clear on the Work Manager, we support iOS, Android, and Windows as well. Just to be clear, I wasn't very clear on that. I think our last question, just wanted to let you know if we missed any questions, we will certainly follow up with an email to you. And so the last question is, Doug, for you, you have created an excellent framework to identify and quantify direct financial value from your Agile asset system. Are you willing to receive calls and share what you've developed from other DOTs that want to explore this as well?
I would be happy to help anybody put numbers. I'm not an economist by training, so I try to keep things as simple as possible and understandable. So, you know, what I showed you was simply the area office's savings, and basically it came from interviewing them, saying how much time to take before, how much time to take now, and would be happy to share any methodology that I came up with, and maybe even suggest some. But the simpler the better. If you start adding economic principles to it, you're just going to confuse it, or at least it confuses me.
All right. Well, that's a good segue to our last slide. You have the contact information for Doug and myself. I really want to thank all those that have participated. We really appreciate your time, and if you have any questions, please follow up with us, and we will follow up with those questions we couldn't get to. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Todd. Appreciate it.